If you're tuning in, it's probably because you love birds. This talk will provide you with ideas about how you can help wild birds. Let's all make a New Year's resolution to make a difference for birds and our natural world. This talk will cover everything from landscaping tips, gardener ideas, feeder placement, to installing birdhouses and how to make buildings friendlier for birds. I will also discuss preventing wildlife entanglement and litter ingestion, and also what are some hunting and fishing practices that are bird friendly. Lastly, I will highlight community science projects you can volunteer for and suggest ways to speak up for birds. Let's start with landscaping. Orleans Audubon Society volunteers have rescued a number of birds, including anhingas, that have gotten tangled up in plastic mesh netting that was used to grow and transport lawn turf. This type of turf support system is really a nightmare for birds, snakes, and other wildlife. So if you're buying turf, make sure it is not grown in any type of mesh netting. And if you already have this kind of turf installed on your lawn, make sure that the netting stays buried and covered. Let's move on to gardening. Now's a good time to consider planting shrubs that attract birds like bottlebrush, or better yet, go completely native. Orleans Audubon has several resources available on our website about native plants for birds. You can visit jjaudubon.net and click on Gardening for Wildlife to find a link to the Wendy Reiner's recording of a talk that's all about native plants for birds. She's got some great tips there. You can also just go to Orleans Audubon Society's YouTube channel to find her talk. Bill Fontenot also has prepared a handout that's a PDF file that was based on his talk, his paper that he did for the Journal of Louisiana Ornithology, looking at what fruits birds eat in Louisiana. And so this guide has like what are the fruiting plants that are recommended for particular species, and it's really handy for selecting what to plant in your garden. And you can find that on the same webpage. National Audubon Society has a native plants database that you might also find useful. You can put in your zip code and it will tell you which native plants are particularly bird friendly and grow well in your area. And what about if you don't have a yard? Well, you can still volunteer to help out our partners at the University of New Orleans. They have a woodlot that's maintained by the Fine Arts Center that's been planted for birds. And they also have plants along the UNO birding trail. A good way to get started is to follow Birds of UNO on Instagram or send an email to birding@uno.edu. Moving on to bird feeders. One thing that a lot of people don't do is they don't clean their feeders, and this can really promote the spread of an eye disease, avian mycoplasmosis. It's bacterial. You can help to prevent the spread of this and other avian diseases by first scrubbing the feeders to remove any old seeds and debris. And then it's recommended that you soak the feeder in a 10% bleach solution, which is 1 part bleach to 9 parts water, for 15 minutes. And then you want to remove all the bleach, so you want to rinse it well, and then of course dry it before refilling it with seeds. And this should be done fairly regularly, like at least monthly. You might also want to consider putting up suet feeders or putting out mealworms for insectivores and omnivores, and placing feeders away from windows, far away from windows, is really important. One thing that we had a problem with was a Cooper's hawk that was coming around to try to attack birds at the feeder, and it would send the birds into a panic and they would strike the window. So moving the feeder another 30 feet away took care of this problem. In Louisiana, you want to maintain your hummingbird feeders year round, and don't use the solutions that you buy from the store that have red dye in them, and you don't need to add red dye to the nectar. It's a good idea to have red on the feeder, though, as this feeder shows here. We usually make up a solution that's 1 part sugar to 3 to 4 parts water, and we heat it up, especially if we're making it a little super saturated, which is the 1 part sugar to 3 parts water. Heating it helps to make it stay fresh longer. You may also want to consider installing nest boxes on your property. This provides both roosting and nesting sites for any of the cavity-dependent species. Right now, for example, we have a red-bellied woodpecker that's roosting in one of our bluebird nest boxes. Placement is important. Oftentimes in the South United States, a south-facing entrance is often desirable. Make sure you read about these things. Make sure there's drainage at the bottom. Pay specific attention to what's recommended as the entrance hole size, because that can keep predators from going into the nest box. And sometimes it's a good idea to have a metal guard if squirrels and flying squirrels are a problem when they enlarge the holes. And you may want to consider predator guards for most of your nest boxes, especially pole guards to keep raccoons and snakes out of the nest boxes. You also want to have access to the nest box so that you can clean it out at least annually. Chimney swifts are so named because they often nest or roost in chimneys, although they also use hollow trees. Orleans Audubon Society partnered with the Barataria Terrebonne National Estuary Program, the University of New Orleans, and the Audubon, Louisiana and Nature Center to build and install chimney swift towers at UNO and at the Nature Center. I had seen chimney swifts also displaying over my chimney in previous summers. So in 2024, I climbed up on my roof and removed the hardware cloth guard from my chimney. The swifts roosted and nested in my chimney this year. And here's one of the swifts that we banded. And on the right, you can see the used nest after it fell down through the chimney. Beautiful birds. Eastern purple martins are almost entirely dependent on humans to provide their nesting sites. There's a real growing concern that not enough younger folks are keeping martin houses. So please spread the word. And if you have the opportunity to erect a martin house, do so. They do need kind of open areas, so not everybody's place is conducive to a purple martin house. Or maybe in your subdivision, there's a park or a field where you could talk to the homeowners association and put up a martin house. Window collisions are a real problem for birds. This red-shouldered hawk hit a window at the University of New Orleans, and it looks like it's dead, but fortunately it's just unconscious. All it needed was a couple of days rest to recover from a concussion. We were able to band and release it, but many birds aren't so lucky. This is a Cooper's hawk that also recovered from a collision with a window. And one of the ways that you can prevent collisions is to install these feather-friendly dots in a matrix on the window. It really works. The dots reflect into the UV spectrum that birds see very well. And you can also cover windows with netting. And again, moving feeders away from windows is another thing that can help. Another way to make buildings user-friendly to birds and reduce collisions is to turn out the lights at night during spring and fall migration. The Birdcast website has forecasts to let you know when large numbers of birds will be migrating through your area, so you can check it out, and we'll be sending out announcements to let people know when there are times that are particularly of high risk. If you're in control of an office building, please consider adopting the Lights Out program to help prevent collisions. Another way to make buildings bird-friendly is to never, ever use anticoagulant rodenticides. Here's what happens. When a hawk or owl eats a mouse or rat that is dying from the rodenticide, like decon, the raptor dies too, and it's really sad. And it poisons other birds besides birds of prey, like crows. Regarding plastics, The plastic six-pack rings are still a big problem for wildlife. Even if you are disposing of them properly, these lightweight plastics often blow out of garbage trucks and end up in nature. It's best to cut up every single ring and hole to prevent wildlife entanglement before discarding it. Look at this, what happened to this poor great blue heron. Helium balloon releases pose another deadly threat to wildlife. This frigate bird died due to entanglement, but ingestion of the balloons also kills birds. Balloon releases should be banned. Please discourage this practice among your family and friends and suggest bird-friendly alternatives. Now let's talk about hunting practices that are more bird-friendly. Lead poisoning is a deadly problem for bald eagles and other birds of prey that scavenge. This radiograph shows the lead that's in an eagle's digestive tract, and the lead that the eagle ate came from scavenging a deer carcass. The good news is that it's pretty easy to fix this problem. One preventative is to properly dispose of the carcass, especially the area where the deer or hog was shot. For example, the hunter might cut that portion out and bury it deep enough that scavengers won't find it. But a better solution is to go with non-lead ammo. You can switch to an alternative that's non-toxic, such as copper, steel, or tin. Yeah, these tend to be a little more expensive, but look at the price we're paying for using lead. And also, who wants lead in their food? Fishing is a great hobby, but certain fishing practices can be very harmful to birds. The good news is there are easy ways to fish in a bird-friendly manner. Loons and grebes are particularly susceptible to ingesting lures and other lead fishing tackle. So some of the things you can do are to use only non-lead fishing tackle such as bismuth, tin, tungsten, steel, or ceramics. And you can ask your sporting goods stores to carry lead-free fishing tackle. And also educate others about the dangers of lead fishing tackle and ask them to use non-lead alternatives. Fishing tackle can also be a hazard for eagles and osprey. This was several years ago, the Metairie nest that's near Cleveland and Kewanee. One of the babies was entangled in a fishing lure, and it couldn't even stand up. So it's really important that fishers will consider avoiding casting in places where your line or rig is likely to become snagged or tangled, and clean up any fishing tackle and line that's left behind by others. In the Pearl River Basin, old trot lines pose a real hazard to barred owls, red-shouldered hawks, and swallowtail kites. If you run a trot line, it is your responsibility to take it down when not in use. And if you encounter an old trot line, please consider cutting it down. This is the photo of an anhinga with plastic mesh and line around its bill. And it's just a reminder that any kind of line or netting can become a wildlife hazard. Let's move on to community science now. Orleans Audubon Society has a long-term study on swallowtail kites. Sighting reports help us to find and locate nests and roosts and to monitor and conserve the species. If you see a swallowtail kite, please report it in eBird or call or text me or email details to orleansaudubon@aol.com. If you find a roost or a nest or see a bird carrying food or nest material, this is a really hot lead, so please make sure you report it as soon as possible. Orleans Audubon Society has 2 kite tracking and conservation projects in 2025 that you may want to volunteer for. The tracking project in the Barataria-Terrebonne Basin is a collaboration between the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program, Avian Research and Conservation Institute, and the McDaniel Charitable Foundation. Volunteers help monitor kites, conduct boat surveys, capture and outfit kites with tracking devices, and reach out to landowners. Orleans Audubon has a similar kite tracking project in the Pearl River Basin that's focused on private timberlands. We're working with the American Bird Conservancy, the Avian Research and Conservation Institute, and International Paper in collaboration with the McDaniel Charitable Foundation. We're finding kites that are nesting on or near privately owned timberlands and providing voluntary recommendations to landowners and managers so that they can manage their forests sustainably in a bird-friendly way. Orleans Audubon Society also has a bald eagle nest monitoring program that's going on now in Louisiana and Mississippi, because of course these are winter nesters. Nests that are viewable from public roads are in eBird, and you can enter the data online for them. You can contact me at orleansaudubon@aol.com if you'd like to help out with this project. We can assign you a nest to monitor. Orleans Audubon Society is also recruiting volunteers for 2 projects that Audubon Delta is spearheading, the first of which is the rooftop nesting birds in the greater New Orleans area. Chloe St. Germain Vermillion needs volunteers to search for and help monitor and conserve rooftop nesting bird colonies, including killdeer and nighthawks, as well as all the different tern species and skimmers. The second Audubon Delta Community Science Project in need of volunteers is the Audubon Coastal Bird Surveys Program. Once again, Chloe St. Germain Vermillion is the point of contact for this project as well. And the Purple Martin Conservation Association has an interesting project that you can contribute data to. It's their Scout Arrival Study. You can report observations of the first martins that you observed in 2025. Last year, the earliest reports from our area were on January 2nd. So now is the time to get those martin houses up and ready. And the peak scout arrival time for our area was around January 15th, as you can see from this map. Visit purplemartin.org for more information. And finally, another way you can help birds is to become an ambassador for birds. Birds need people to sing their praises. Visit jjaudubon.net or scan this QR code to download the kite conservation brochure, and it will provide some guidance to get you started. Swallowtail kites really need ambassadors because, believe it or not, folks, they're still being shot. So are whooping cranes and other wild birds. So you might help by giving a talk or writing an article about about birds for your favorite sporting group, or you might give a talk to a hunter education class. People need to know about the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and how most of our native wild birds are protected from any type of hunting or persecution. Other ways that you can become an ambassador for birds and wildlife is you could lead a birding walk, or you could give a talk about birds or birding. You might help scouts with bird-friendly projects like nest boxes. You might educate people who hunt and fish on your land. You might inform and recruit land managers to help with citizen science projects on your land. You could volunteer for a non-government organization education program at the zoo, the Nature Center, Orleans Audubon, etc. And you might get others involved by inviting family and friends to Orleans Audubon Society programs. We're open to the public. Finally, please consider Orleans Audubon Society in your year-end giving. Your donation will allow us to help native birds and wildlife and also to expand our environmental education program and advocacy. You can visit the Orleans Audubon website or scan this QR code with your smartphone's camera to open the link to donate. Thanks, everyone.